Hi, I'm Ralph Hruban, the Baxley Professor and Director of the Department of Pathology, and I'd love to tell you about our first chairman, Dr. William Henry Welch. Dr. Welch was born in Connecticut to a family of physicians, but the family was by no means wealthy. In fact, his mother was born in a log cabin. Dr. Welch excelled as a young student and at the age of 16 entered Yale College, where again he was just simply a brilliant student. In fact, one of his friends said that learning was as easy as breathing for William Welch. After graduating from college, and in college he focused or majored in the classics and studied Greek and religion. After graduating, his goal was to become a Greek professor teaching Greek at Yale, but there were no positions available for him. So for a year he tutored school children, and as Flexner said in his biography of Welch, everything looked so bleak and dark for Welch that he was left with no choice but to follow in the family business and become a physician. Welch then went to the College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York. The College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York was not the same school back then that it is today. In fact, there were really no admission standards. All you had to do was pay tuition and you were accepted to the school. Welch excelled in medical school, graduated after 3 years, and then did what is equivalent to an internship at Bellevue. After finishing that internship year, he essentially had gotten all the training that one can get in the United States. He was at the peak, if you will, of American medicine. He therefore went to Europe, where he wanted to study and become a physician scientist. The contrast was amazing. In New York, he was at the top of his field, a brilliant student. When he arrived in Europe, von Recklinghausen rejected him because he didn't know enough histology. Nonetheless, Welch persevered. He studied with Cohenheim, Waldeyer, and other great European scientists. In Europe, a remarkable thing happened. He met John Shaw Billings, who was in Europe looking for the future leaders of Johns Hopkins. The two of them met in Rathskeller under the painting of Faust making his deal with the devil. And they sat there and they talked about their shared dream, their shared vision of applying science to medicine. Welch then returned to the United States and had a job at Bellevue. Here, his goal again was to apply science to medicine. Sadly, all they could provide him was $25 worth of startup equipment, if you will. He could only afford a few kitchen tables, and it really was in no position to conduct the same type of science that he was doing in Europe. He persevered, and in 1884, John Shaw Billings offered him the job at Johns Hopkins. Welch was the first professor in the School of Medicine. He became the director of pathology, and he forever changed American medicine through his work at Hopkins. At Hopkins, in the research lab, he started the pathology research lab, and it was an incredible thing. Young physician scientists joined the lab, and they were inspired by Welch, merely by his presence and his vision of science applied to medicine. Many of them conducted independent research and went on to great careers, becoming department chairs, deans, and other leaders in American medicine. He was charismatic in his devotion to science, and it's that fundamentally changed the American medicine's view of medicine. It would forever now be viewed through this filter of science. Welch was also a great teacher, and again, he taught not by using the standard textbooks, but he brought students to the original material and had them read the original material, and then in the teaching lab, do for themselves and learn by doing, making their own slides, preparing their own slides, looking and learning by doing. So he fundamentally changed the way medicine was taught in the United States, as well as brought research to the field. Welch quickly became a leader here at Hopkins. In addition to being the first director of the Department of Pathology, he became the first dean of the School of Medicine, the first dean of the School of Public Health, the first director of the Institute of History of Medicine. Beyond the walls of Hopkins, he was also an incredible leader. He was became the president of the American Medical Association, president of the National Academy of Science, and many, many other leadership roles. He also led medicine internationally. And in fact, in 1950, when Rockefeller wanted to bring American-style medicine to China. The first person he called was William Welch. Welch went to China and helped establish the Peking Union Medical College, which is in many ways modeled after Johns Hopkins. The impact that Welch had on American medicine is palpable, and in fact, in 1930, on his 80th birthday, he was on the cover of Time magazine. Welch lived several more years after that and died of cancer in 1934. What I'd like to do now is share with you some comments that his colleagues had, because I think they beautifully illustrate the impact that Welch had on his colleagues and on American medicine. Lauriston Schaaf, Welch's classmate and roommate at Yale, wrote to Welch, "I feel that I ought to try to express my indebtedness for all the kindness with which you always manifested towards me, the pure example you set, but more than all for the patience with which you endured my many annoying practices and habits. Billy, I feel now more deeply than ever the truth of what I have often said to others, if not to you, that I was utterly unworthy such a chum as yourself. I often pitied you to think you were compelled to room with me, you're inferior in ability, dignity, and every good and noble quality." Osler, in his diary, wrote about Welch, "By far the ablest man of the group was the professor of pathology, William H. Welch. A more useful man never lived. His time, his books, his purse were at the command of all. He was the most even-balanced individual I have ever met, never perturbed, always in good humor, and always ready to look on the bright side of things. I never heard him pass a harsh judgment on anyone. He had strong convictions and never was afraid of expressing his opinion. One always knew where he stood in any debatable question, one which he generally said the last word." William Stewart Halstead's wife, Carolyn Halstead, wrote to Welch after Halstead's death, "I sometimes wonder if you have any idea of the great love and admiration that Dr. Halstead had for you. He never mentioned you without praise. Most of us meet with adverse criticism from those who love us best, but I never heard him say anything but what a true friend you had always been to him, and how much you and all your work meant to the Johns Hopkins. He often said, 'Welch is the Johns Hopkins. Without him, it would be nothing. He has been the best friend to me that any man could ever be.'" These quotations I wanted to share with you because I think they beautifully capture the spirit of William Henry Welch. They showed what a kind individual he was, what an immensely talented individual he was, and the impact he had around those around him. It is because of William Henry Welch that American medicine was forever changed, and forever we will view it through the lens of science.